Today we have part 2 of the story with the headline, Story of the Golden Yukon. Canadian surveyor describes the region. History and prospects. The subheadline says, The first discoveries and the original Klondike rush. Character of the country. Difficulties of prospecting and the magnificent rewards that await successful miners in the richest gold region of the world. Practical information as to mining methods, other minerals besides gold, no agricultural possibilities, interesting personal reminiscences. It says, Character of the country. Regarding the surface of the country and the difficulties of prospecting, he says, Passing down the river in a boat, one sees a succession of trees, 10, 12, 14, and 16 inches in diameter, and he naturally comes to the conclusion that it is a well-timbered country, and so it is, along the margin of the river. But let him disembark and go inland, and he will find the ground covered with what are locally known as blackheads, which consist of columns of decayed coarse grass peculiar to this region. They are formed by the annual growths of grasses decaying and falling down, while year after year the roots of the growing grasses bind this together into an almost solid column, which stands upon a bed of mud. To walk across a blackhead swamp is one of the most fatiguing exercises one can take. You cannot walk on them, you must walk between them. Put your foot on top of one of them, it sways under you, and down you go to your knees, in the mud between them. The result is that the miners and other residents of that country keep as far away from the blackhead swamp as they conveniently can, avoiding it as they would the plague. For the rest of the country, the surface is covered by from 1 to 2 feet of moss, and underneath the everlasting frost. On this, a scrubby growth of trees is found extending up the mountainsides to an altitude of from 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the river. It is this which appears to those passing down the river in boats to be a continuation of the good timber seen along the banks. Timber that is fit for anything is scarce, and we should husband it carefully. A great deal of our timber has already gone down the river. It was our timber that built Circle City. Our timber has indeed served all the purposes of the upper Yukon country. A large amount of timber is required for the development of our own resources on the upper river, and our government should at once take steps to protect it for our own use and benefit. Above the timberline, you come to the bare rocks, the crest bare, save where clothed with a growth of lichen, on which the caribou feeds. There's no timber in the way here, no moss, and no brush. The miners consequently keep as much as possible to the top of the ridge. Bedrock prospecting. Bedrock prospecting necessarily has to be reserved for the winter. First the moss has to be cleared away, and then the muck or decayed vegetable mold has to be picked away for a depth of 2 or 3 feet. After 2 or 3 feet in depth has been picked out, a fire is built in this hole, as it is termed, in the evening. In the morning, the ground which has been thawed by the fire is shoveled out, and in the afternoon, wood for another fire is procured. In the evening, another fire is built. The ground thawed by this is shoveled out the following morning, and so on until the bedrock is reached. 6, 8, 10, and 12 feet of the surface is decayed vegetable matter and alluvial deposit of sand in the clay, turned by the miners' muck. As soon as gravel is struck, prospecting is commenced. That is, a pan or two of the dirt is washed to determine whether it is worth keeping or not, as the refuse is thrown on one side of the hole and the pay dirt on the other. Near to and on bedrock the pay is found, which is generally not more than 2 or 3 feet deep. All the way through the so-called muck, we find trees lying in every direction. Those trees are the same kinds of wood and present the same appearances of growth as those today growing on the surface. In order to determine approximately the age of the pay dirt, I have made a special study of features in this connection, but did not obtain sufficient data, nor was I there long enough to do so. I know that trees are now growing on the surface from 100 to 150 years of age. The roots of these very often engirdling trees, fully as old, are the same kind, lying immediately beneath them. Beneath these again are other trees, and so on, down to a depth often of 12 or 14 feet. From this we must infer that the gold deposit, or pay dirt, was made thousands of years ago. Yet in it, we find the bones of animals which are still quite common in the district, and of others which are found farther to the south. I have in my possession 2 horns of the bison, or so-called buffalo, which a few years ago roamed the prairies to the south and east of this in vast herds. These were, when I got them, in a better state of preservation than similar horns which one would pick up in a journey from, say, Calgary to McLeod, or any other part of our prairie region which the buffalo frequented. I have also part of the horn of a moose and part of the head of an elk, showing the brain cavity, which is as large and well developed as that of any elk which might be found there today. I have also part of what I believe to be the neck vertebrae of the bison. Along with these are found the teeth of the mastodon, several of which were picked up on the claims of Bonanza and El Dorado last winter. In one of these claims, a piece of a rib was found in the pastry, to which some of the frozen flesh still adhered. It crumbled away, however, almost immediately on exposure to heat and the air. This piece of rib was not more than 2 inches in length, and from its size very probably belonged to one of the smaller animals, such as the mound sheep or goat. I did not see or hear of any evidence of the existence of man at any depth in those creeks. Manner of getting out the dirt. Now a few words on the manner of getting out the dirt in this region. As soon as the ground is frozen sufficiently to enable us to prosecute our work without interference from water, we sink a hole to bedrock, as I have before described. The time it takes is measured by the depth of the hole, 1 foot per day being counted fair work. Should we reach bedrock without finding prospects, another hole has to be sunk in the same way, and this process continued until the pay is struck. One claim holder may locate pay at the very first hole. The man adjoining may have to sink many. I know of one instance in which 11 holes were sunk across the valley without anything being struck in any of them. In fact, the valley was almost cross-cut, as it is termed, yet a miner in the vicinity paid this unfortunate man $2,500 for a half interest in his claim, being well aware of the fact that 11 holes had been put down and nothing found. This, I think, gives one an idea of the confidence the miners have in the ground on those creeks. Now suppose pay is struck in one of the holes. The pay streak, as I have said before, is seldom more than 3 feet in depth. On the side of the hole which shows the best indications, a fire is placed, which falls out a few inches on that wall. In the morning, the waste dirt, or what contains no pay, is shoveled out and thrown to one side, the pay dirt being placed in what is termed the dump, which freezes solid soon after it has reached top. This process is continued in the direction of the best pay, a distance which is governed by the thickness of the crust on top. If this is 20 feet, you may drift 30 feet with safety, when a new hole or a shaft has to be sunk and the drifting continued. In this way, the pay streak is taken from underneath the surface in the winter until the water begins running in the spring, finds its way into the shafts, and hinders operations to such an extent that they are closed. Preparations for the erection of dams are then made and sluice boxes procured with which to wash the dump. Sluicing. A sluice box is about 10 inches in width and 12 feet in length. The box is so made that they fit into each other like the joints of a telescope. In these are placed what are called riffle bars, which are strips of wood about 1 inch square and 8 or 10 feet long, nailed together at their ends so as to be parallel with each other and about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch apart. These are placed longitudinally in the sluice boxes, which are set up so as to have an incline of 2 or 3 inches fall per foot of their length. Into this system of boxes, a stream of water is directed, which must be of sufficient volume to carry with it the gravel and dirt that are in the dump. As soon as the sun has attained sufficient force to fall at the surface of the dump, it is shoveled into these sluice boxes. The water carries down with it to the tailings, and is termed the refuse, that is, the gravel, sand, and other matter which is not wanted. The gold and the black sand, which is simply pulverized magnetic ore, owing to their much greater weight, fall between the riffle bars and are held there. As soon as the riffle bars are filled, so that there is danger of the gold passing over and downward to the tailings, the flow of water is stopped, and what is called the cleanup is made. That is, the riffle bars are lifted out, and the contents of the sluice boxes gathered, and the black sand and other refuse separated. Extraordinary strikes. In one instance, 80 avoirdupois pounds of gold were realized from a single cleanup, representing about $16,000 in money. This seems extraordinary, but we must bear in mind that the dump from which this came contained only $110,000, and took the united efforts of 5 or 6 men at $1.50 per hour for upward of 3 months, not including the labor of sluicing, so that although it is tremendously rich, it is not exactly all profit. I saw the other evening in one of the papers that a man who owns a claim on El Dorado and another on Bear Creek has sold out for $1 million. He went into the country a poor man, with the intention of raising sufficient money to pay off the mortgage on his place. Well, he has done so. He has not only paid off his own mortgage, but the mortgages of his neighbors. Although these creeks are rich, and as I have told you, more men have made homestakes there than anywhere else in the world, I do not wish you to look only on the bright side of the picture. An American from Seattle came in June 1896 to the 40 Mile with his wife, with the intention of bettering his condition. They went out again last July with $52,000. I was well acquainted with this man, a very decent, intelligent chap. He told me one day that if he could remain in that country from 3 to 5 years and go out with $5,000, he would consider himself in great luck. He has come out with $52,000, and after prospecting his claim at both ends and a little in the middle, he concludes that there is $1,500,000 in it. Hard luck stories. On the other hand, an old Scotchman of the name of Marks has been in there for 11 years. I have known him well, and once when he was sick last fall, I happened to ask him how old he was. 63 years, he said. Then I asked him how long he had been mining. His reply was 42 years, in all parts of the world except Australia. In answer to a question as to whether he had never made his stake, he told me he had never yet made more than a living, and often that was very scanty. This, of course, is the opposite experience, but I could quote scores of similar cases, so that I would not have you to look too much on the bright side. There are men in that country who are poor, and who will remain so. It has not been their luck, as they call it, to strike it rich, but I may say that the country offers to men of great fortitude, steadiness, and some intelligence, an opportunity to make more money in a given time than they could possibly make anywhere else. You have, of course, a good deal to contend with. Your patience will be sorely tried, for the conditions are so unique that they have surprised many who have gone in hopefully and have left in disgust. There are many obstacles and disagreeable conditions in prospecting. During the summer and until September, the mosquitoes are a veritable plague. They seem to feed on smoke, and as to fire, they appear to revel in it. The only way to escape them is to cover oneself with mosquito netting. Indeed, it is impossible to prospect in the summertime, unless a man be an old miner and well hardened, for all day long and 24 hours in the day, those mosquitoes are after you. It is no use trying to get rid of them. Of course they are not an annoyance in the wintertime. No agricultural possibilities. The Yukon can never be an agricultural country, for the thermometer sinks so often below 40 degrees, at which temperature vegetable development comes to a standstill, that only the commonest garden produce, such as radishes, lettuce, small cabbages, and small turnips, attain sufficient size for use. The Alaska Commercial Company has had a couple of acres under cultivation in the vicinity of 40 Mile for several years. On this, it has sown oats, but they never ripened. Good fodder for cattle could be had in this way by importing barley and oats, but the seed would have to be brought in every season, for there is no kernel in the pod or the shell. To those contemplating taking horses or cattle into the country for other purposes than slaughter, I would say, go in a couple of years in advance, get a favorable piece of land, clear it, and prepare for the cultivation of such fodder as this. Otherwise, you will have to import all your fodder. Horses have been in use at 40 Mile for several years now, but the owners depend largely on the trading companies for the food for their sustenance. Mr. Harper has had several horses at Selkirk for several years, the fodder for which he cuts from ponds in the vicinity. On this, they pull through the winter, but they are not in a condition to do any work. Mr. Harper also has a small garden at Selkirk, in which he cultivates potatoes of fair quality. To preserve them from the frost, he has had a large blanket, as it might be termed, made out of heavy ticking. Every evening when the sky is clear and frost friends, he suspends this just over the potato tops. This to a very great degree subdues the intensity of the frost and its action upon the potatoes, but does not save them entirely. At 60 Mile also, he has a small garden on which pretty fair potatoes are grown. This spot is more favorably situated than is the other locality, as the tubers are closer to the bank of the river with a warmer sandy soil. The farming area is, however, very small in comparison with the surface of the country, being entirely limited to the river bottoms, so that all vegetable food must be taken into the country, as it cannot be grown there except at an enormous cost, and therefore will not pay. Animal food. For animal food, they are the caribou and the moose, But the moose are never within 30 or 40 miles of the mines, so that it takes 2 or 3 days going from the camps to hunt them. There are 2 white mountain sheep, pure white in color, but otherwise resembling very much in appearance the gray ones found in more southern latitudes, but with a finer horn, more nicely curved. The caribou, although they roam over the hills in vast herds, are migratory in their nature and rarely found 2 successive seasons in the same place. The natural products of the country, as a food supply, may be said to be valueless when compared with the demand which will soon exist for it there. It might indeed be said that all food will have to be imported. In the river are some small fish resembling the grayling, and the salmon annually make their way up as far as the canyon, some 2,000 miles from the sea. But long ere they reach that point, they are pretty well spent. The only timber in the country that is fit for mercantile purposes is spruce. There are a few poplars, which however are generally unfit for anything except fuel. The spruce is soft, weak, and full of knots. I came a good deal in contact with those men during my work about the creeks, settled many of the disputes arising between them, adjusted many differences, and everywhere and every time, they had the highest respect for the law. Never but once was anything unkind or uncomplimentary said about what was done, and in that case, the offenders soon after offered a most ample apology. I think I can safely assert that taken as a whole, there is no more lawlessness or disorder in the minds of the miners of that district than there is in the minds of the citizens of our most highly civilized communities in this favored land. In conclusion, let me say that we have in the far Northland a vast region comprising from 90,000 to 100,000 square miles of untold possibilities. Rich deposits we know exist in it, and for aught we know many more equally rich may yet be found. We know now that there is sufficient to supply a population of 100,000 people, and I look forward to seeing that number in that country within the next 10 years. Mr. Ogilvy says he objects to the word Klondike as descriptive of the Yukon country because that is so small a portion of the territory we have up there in the Yukon region, in comparison with which the area of the Klondike is an insignificant quantity. This story came from the great state of Iowa, being reported in the Alton Democrat of January 8, 1898. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave, to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.